Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Horizon Seeker. In this spacecraft, we will adventure throughout the universe and talk about its planets, stars, moons, comets, galaxies, and so on. To do so, this ship defies the laws of physics by going beyond the speed of light, as well as time traveling into the past and future. My name is Stradivari, and in this journey we will return to the moon and talk about the missions that we, Earthlings, sent there. What's the history about the space race to the moon? How many missions were necessary before we sent a person to the moon? Who went there? Where are the landing places? What is happening with the missions today? So come on board and stay with me until the end. Okay, so let's fly up and take the cockpit. If you didn't see my previous trip to the moon, when we talked about some curiosities that circles it, like what is the moon, how did it form, if it's moving away from Earth, if the moon rotates, and if there is water on the moon, don't forget to check it after we finish this trip. The link is showing up on the card and also will be on the description. To understand the missions to the moon and why they occurred, we first need to know about some history. While we travel to the moon, let's open our internal computer simulator, which we will call ICS from now on. With the end of the Second World War, two major superpowers, the United States of America and the Soviet Union, emerged to divide the world in two different ideological models: capitalism and communism. That period was known as the Cold War, that endured from 1947 to 1991, and they both developed the atomic bomb. So they started to compete in many areas, as well as space exploration. After the end of the Second World War, both United States and the Soviet Union laid their hands on the details of a Nazi German program that resulted on the production of the first ballistic missile and used it to develop their own programs. That led to great advances on missile and rocket production area. Now, just a curiosity, the responsible for that Nazi German program that resulted on the first ballistic missile launched by the Nazis at the end of the Second World War was Wernher von Braun. Later on, after the war, was taken by the United States and led the Army's Redstone rocket program and helped to launch the first American satellite, the Explorer 1. We will talk about it in a few minutes. But first, in October 4, 1957, from Turatam at Kazakhstan, the Soviet Union launched the first artificial satellite, the Sputnik 1, that orbited Earth for 22 days. That event is considered to be the beginning of the space race. This was the result of the work of an Ukrainian scientist named Sergei Pavlovich Korolev, considered the father of Soviet astronautics. Let's hear Sputnik 1's radio signal captured from space. One month later, the Soviet Union sent Sputnik 2 to space on November 3, 1957. Inside of it was Laika, the first living creature to be shot into space and orbit Earth. Laika was a stray dog found on the streets of Moscow. There were no plans to return her to Earth, so unfortunately she lived only a few hours in orbit. That technological advance suggested that the Soviet Union could guarantee the political and military supremacy on the world. So, in Pasadena, California, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, working together with the California Technology Institute, Caltech, launched in January 31, 1958, America's first satellite, the Explorer 1. In this picture, we can see the three men responsible for the success of Explorer 1, William Pickering, James Van Allen, and Werner von Braun, the man we talked earlier that was responsible for the Nazi German program that resulted on the first ballistic missile launched by the Nazis at the end of the Second World War. That achievement wasn't reached by NASA because it was created a few months later, on July 29, 1958, when President Eisenhower signed legislation creating NASA, which became operational on October 1, 1958. That was the beginning of the space programs that resulted on the launch of several satellites and missions throughout the space. From now on, in this trip, we will focus on the ones destined to the moon. Be sure to subscribe and activate the bell to know when we will make other trips and talk about other missions like the ones made to Venus, Mars, and more. Now, let's talk about the missions made to the moon. Since August 17, 1958 until December 1, 2020, there were a total of 110 missions to the moon. 41 were unsuccessful. 8 had partial success, which means they had a few problems. 58 were successful, and 3 more are still active, which are the Artemis and the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter sent by the United States and Chang'e 3 sent by China. On this trip, we will briefly talk about the missions to the moon, sticking to the most important ones. For more detailed information on all those missions, check the link on the description. Now let's open our ICS again. The first ever launch to the moon and humanity's first attempt to send a spacecraft anywhere beyond Earth orbit was Able 1, later called Pioneer 0. It was launched 6.5 months after Explorer 1, America's first satellite. But because of a malfunction, it exploded 73.6 seconds after launch, at an altitude of 15 kilometers. Despite of that, its importance to the world is that it was the first attempt by any nation to launch a probe into deep space and also the first attempt to send a spacecraft to the moon. In January 2, 1959, the Soviet Union launched the Cosmic Rocket spacecraft, which was renamed years later to Luna 1. Its objective was to hit the moon, but due to a malfunction on its guidance system, Luna 1 missed it, although it was the first man-made object to escape Earth's gravity. Later in the same year, on September 12, 1959, the Soviet Union launched the second Soviet cosmic rocket, later renamed to Luna 2. That was the first successful mission sent by any nation to the moon. Its objective was to send a probe crashing into the satellite. That objective was accomplished 2 days after it was launched, making Luna 2 the first human-made object to reach the surface of another celestial body. Less than a month later, on October 6, 1959, the Soviet Union launched the Automatic Interplanetary Station, later renamed to Luna 3. Its objective was to take photographs of the far side of the moon, a region never seen by humans. Luna 3 was another successful mission. It took 29 pictures of the far side of the moon, which 17 were of usable quality. This is the first picture of the far side of the moon on the left, and the picture taken by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter on the right. Luna 3's picture of the far side showed less sign of volcanic plains than the side we see from Earth, which prompted scientists to revise their theories of lunar evolution. Check our previous trip to the moon, when we talked about the current theory of how the moon formed, which is showing up here on the card. So, 5 years after Luna 3, in July 28, 1964, the United States managed its first successful mission to the Moon, sending Ranger 7 to take 4,316 images before crashing on the northern rim of the Sea of Clouds. The images helped identify safe moon landing sites for Apollo astronauts. This is the Sea of Clouds where Ranger 7 crashed. The Ranger 7 mission was a turning point to American deep space exploration, as after this mission, the success rate increased dramatically. After that, there were many successful missions with a variety of objectives, like the Luna 9 in 1966 that was the first spacecraft to safely land on the Moon, taking the first 9 pictures from its surface. Well, now we will talk about the missions that took humans to the Moon, the Apollo program. But first, before a successful mission with humans to the Moon, we need to talk about the unsuccessful one. On January 27, 1967, NASA attempted to launch first humans to space, but that was a tragedy that resulted on the death of the astronauts Virgil Grissom, Edward White, and Roger Chaffee. After that, NASA decided that the next mission would be called Apollo 4 because of the 3 previous rocket tests, so that's no Apollo 2 and 3. Apollo 4, that was a successful rocket test, was also called the first giant step. Apollos 5 and 6 were rocket and lunar module test flights. Both showed problems. Apollo 7 was the return of the manned flights. The spacecraft orbited Earth to test life support, control, and propulsion systems. On December 21, 1968, NASA launched the first manned mission to the Moon. It took Frank Borman, James Lovell Jr., and William Anders to orbit the Moon and come back Earth. That mission was also the first human excursion beyond low Earth orbit and the first in-person observations of Earth from a distance. Let's quickly open our ICS again. This is Apollo 8's iconic Earthrise image. This is the first time humans saw their home planet rising above the Moon with their own eyes. Now, while we fly around the Moon, let's hear the Christmas Eve message sent by the Apollo 8 crew while they orbited the satellite. That was the 10 first verses of the Genesis book.
We are now approaching lunar sunrise, and for all the people back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
Now, the most important mission to the Moon, at least the most known by mankind, was the Apollo 11. On July 16, 1969, NASA launched the Apollo 11, taking Neil Armstrong, Edwin Aldrin Jr., and Michael Collins to land on the surface of the Moon. Let's go to the landing place on the Sea of Tranquility, where they landed on July 20, 1969. There are many important results from this mission, but the highlighted ones are that it was the first time humans walked on the Moon, and also the first words spoken from the surface of another world. Let's hear what Neil Armstrong said just when he and Buzz Aldrin landed on the Moon.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
And of course, the most important words that we all remember were said 6 hours later by Neil Armstrong, when he was the first human to step foot on the Moon.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
This is where the Eagle has landed, and this is the lunar module. But this is not how it looks today, because when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin left the Moon, they did it on this part of the module, called the ascent stage, and left behind the descent stage. Apart from the primary objective, that was to perform a crewed lunar landing and return to Earth, Apollo 11 had additional objectives that included scientific exploration by the lunar module crew, the deployment of a television camera to transmit signals to Earth, and the deployment of a solar wind composition experiment, seismic experiment package, and a laser-ranging retroreflector. They also had to take rock samples and lots of photographs. Later that year, on November 14, 1969, NASA launched the Apollo 12, taking Charles Conrad Jr., Alan Bean, and Richard Gordon Jr. to the Moon. Let's go to the site where the lunar module called Intrepid landed. They landed on November 19, 1969 at the Ocean of Storms, which is here. It was the first time a mission landed precisely on a predetermined spot. They did that to pick up parts of a previous mission probe, the Surveyor 3, sent there more than 2.5 years before, and bring them back to Earth for scientists to analyze the effects on the materials of that amount of time on the Moon. Let's see a picture of it on our ICS. This is a picture showing the Surveyor 3 and at the back the lunar module Intrepid. This is the Intrepid, the lunar module of the Apollo 12 mission. As well as the lunar module Eagle from the Apollo 11, this part, called Ascent Stage, left the Moon to take the astronauts back to the Command module that stayed orbiting the Moon. After that, the Apollo 13 had problems on the way to the Moon, as they told us on that movie with Tom Hanks. If you didn't watch it, that's a good suggestion. The famous expression, "Houston, we have a problem," was said in that mission. Then, on January 31, 1971, NASA launched the Apollo 14, taking astronauts Alan Shepard Jr., Stuart Roosa, and Edgar Mitchell to land north of Fra Mauro crater. A curiosity issue about this mission is that it was commanded by the man who had been the first American in space, Alan Shepard Jr. Another curiosity that may be the activity that this mission is remembered of is that at the end of the second moonwalk, Alan Shepard hit 2 golf balls. One of them was found in a crater, making this the first extraterrestrial hole-in-one. Let's see the landing site. This is Fra Mauro crater. Now let's see the lunar module. This is the lunar module Antares, and as the other ones we saw before, this is the entire module, before the astronauts took off on the ascent stage. On July 26, 1971, NASA launched the Apollo 15 that took David Scott, James Irving, and Alfred Worden to the Moon. This mission is remembered especially by the use of the first automotive vehicle on the Moon. This mission had also great focus on science. For example, David Scott used a pen and a hammer to validate Galileo Galilei's theory that the objects with different mass fall at the same time at the absence of air. Here's where Apollo 15's lunar module, named Falcon, landed, at the foot of the Apennine mountain range, along the southeastern edge of Sea of Rains. The Apennines rise up to more than 4,572 meters. Let's check up the Falcon. Apollo 15's mission was also to explore and investigate the geology of the Apennine mountain landing site that was enhanced by the use of the lunar roving vehicle. They also had engineering and operational objectives that included the evaluation of modifications to the lunar module, made to transport more payload and to stay on the Moon more time, like 3 days. And the astronauts had to evaluate changes to Apollo spacesuits and to the portable life support system. This is the lunar module Falcon. Another important mission objective was to launch a sub-satellite into lunar orbit by the Command and Service Module, the one that was orbiting the Moon, shortly before returning to Earth. That sub-satellite was to investigate the Moon's mass and gravitational variations, particle composition of space near the Moon, and the interaction of the Moon's magnetic field with that of Earth. Next one was the Apollo 16, launched on April 16, 1972, and took John Young, Charles Duke, and Thomas Mattingly to the Moon. They landed around the Scarta's crater in the lunar highlands. Let's go to their landing site. Before this mission, scientists thought that the lunar highlands were of volcanic origin, but measurements and samples taken by the Apollo 16 astronauts disproved that hypothesis. Now the theory is that the highlands are made of relatively low-density rock that solidified on the cooling Moon, about 4.4 billion years ago. Another objective to be conducted on the surface was to install an ultraviolet stellar camera to return photography of the Earth and celestial regions in spectral bands not seen from Earth. They also played a lot with the lunar rover through exercises like Grand Prix, doing S-turns, hairpin turns and hard stops to test the vehicle. In orbit, they also launched a sub-satellite shortly before coming back to Earth. This is the lunar module Orion. During the journey back to Earth, Thomas Mattingly did the first spacewalk made by humans. Now, the last human expedition to the Moon, Apollo 17, which was launched December 7, 1972, took Eugene Cernan, Ronald Evans and Harrison Schmitt to land on a valley surrounded by mountains at the southeastern rim of the Sea of Serenity. Let's go see where the lunar module Challenger landed. In this mission, NASA sent the first scientist astronaut to land on the Moon, Harrison Schmitt. The objectives of this mission were to obtain old highland samples and to investigate the possibility of geologically recent explosive volcanism, which they succeeded. Oh, and they sang "Life to the World." Let's hear it.
I was strolling on the moon one day in a merry, merry month of December. Now, May, when much to my surprise, a pair of bunny eyes. Do-do-do-do-do. Oh, is this a neat way to travel? Isn't it great? Dum-da-dum-dum-dum. 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 I like to skip along. Not me, boy. Skip.
After leaving the Moon, they left a plaque there that reads, "Here man completed his first exploration of the Moon, December 1972 AD. May the spirit of peace in which he came be reflected in the lives of all mankind." Until today, the end of 2020, Eugene Cernan was the last human to step on the Moon. These are the Apollo mission landing sites. Today, about 51 years after Neil Armstrong did mankind's first step on the Moon, NASA is preparing to take astronauts back there with the Artemis program. The agency expects to take women to the lunar surface for the first time at the Artemis mission, scheduled to go in 2024. China is also planning to take astronauts to the Moon in 2024. After the last human stepped on the Moon, some missions were made with robots by the Soviet Union and the United States, but other countries started to send missions there, like Japan in 1990 and 2007, the European Agency in 2003, India in 2008, and China from 2007 until today. The last one, Chang'e 5, that was sent by China in November 23, 2020, landed on December 1st, 2020 near Mons Rumker in the Ocean of Storms, located in the northwest region of the Moon's near side, which is this part of the Moon. The mission was to collect samples and return them to Earth for scientific study. This is China's first attempt to bring back material from the Moon since the Soviet Union's Luna 24 mission in 1976. Chang'e is named for a Chinese goddess of the Moon, and the series of the Chinese missions aims to steadily increase their technological capabilities, laying the groundwork for future human landings on the Moon and then on to Mars. On December 3, Chang'e 5 launched from the Moon's surface back to lunar orbit. On December 5, it docked with the orbiter, which was the first fully robotic docking around the Moon in human history. It transferred the samples and then was thrown back to hit the lunar surface. Then the orbiter waited for the right moment to launch back to Earth, which happened on December 13, 2020. So, my friends, there are still many questions left to answer about the Moon, and the most exciting days of lunar activity may still lie ahead as space agencies send humans on the next missions to the Moon and eventually on to Mars. Maybe it will be up to you or your children to go to the Moon and find out more about it. So, if you enjoyed this trip and also want more of it, subscribe to this channel and activate the bell so YouTube will tell you when our next trip is ready to go. And if you can, like this video to help me make a lot more trips like this. Thank you and see you next time.